Alright, gentle humans, welcome back to another one. So today what I want to do is get the harness in the car, and we're going to do it a little bit different. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the idle air and throttle position wiring out of this harness. I'm going to take the driver's side bank injector and coil pack wiring out, and then essentially what I want to do is kind of flip this all backwards so the main part of the harness is coming from the back. So this will still remain running forward like this, but essentially I'll be pivoting everything here and flipping it over and coming back. So the reason I have to disconnect this stuff, take this out of the harness, is because I'm going to have to rework it to come from the other direction. So it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it and show you guys what I think might work. Went ahead and threw the aluminum rails inside the car intake, got the intake bolted down, and I do got to get some spacers. I don't really want to rework the brackets. I'm probably just going to get a longer bolt and some spacers in there, so these injectors will be good. And let's get to the wiring. So I'm starting to pull this injector harness out. So this is going to be for number 3, 5, and 7. And I'm not going to label these when I pull these out, so it kind of forces me to check the pin number when I put it back in there. So I have them all pulled out. I'm not going to label them because these 3 injectors are going to be backwards. So if I label them when I take them out, I feel like I would forget about that and then possibly hook them up wrong. So I don't want to do that because I'm flipping them. So when I do install it and I need to repin them and put them back in, it's going to force me to look at the wire and figure out which injector it is and then put it in the right pin slot. So I'm not going to label those, but the rest of these, injector 1, I'm going to keep connected because it's already connected to the idle air and the throttle position sensor in this little bundle here. So now I'm going to go through, follow all these wires back except for these 12 volt positives. I'll pull these out and I'm going to follow all these back to the plugs on the harness, and as I pull them out I'm going to label the plug color and the pin number so I know exactly where they have to go when I put them back in. Because the alternator's traditionally up here, it's wired in with the idle air and the throttle position. So I'm going to be removing that because the alternator's down here. So I remove the alternator wiring from this section of the harness. I have it completely removed, marked on the plug end as alternator. That's just how I got the harness. It didn't have a plug on it. And then I have the red 15 marked, red 15 alternator, and red 52 alternator. So now I know exactly where these go. And then I can just get a plug for that, wire it on, and then run these back exactly where I need them to be, and then I know where to plug them in. Okay, so this idle air section, throttle position, and injector 1 plug, I have all disconnected now. All the other pins are labeled where they're going to go back in. So I can set this off to the side now. And essentially what I want to do is kind of keep this section here and flip this over the back. So everything else I'll be able to come up from the back side. It'll probably be easier to just do it on the car and explain it that way. But basically now everything on the harness is going to come from the back side of the car, and should work pretty decent. At least it does in my head. Okie dokie. So hopefully you guys can now visualize what I'm talking about by flipping this thing over. So this is the wad. This is where it was split right here, which was normally up on top of the intake, and then it split. So this is still the passenger side injector, coil pack bank. All these wires are staying the same because originally this wire came back and then curved around and came back forward. So I just flipped this part of the harness over the top, and now you can see why I separated this driver's side injector and coil pack wiring. So now I'm going to lay this back over the top and then run it back into here. So this whole section comes over and around. This is all like the O2 wiring. There's a ground here, and I also have the intake air temp wiring in there, and then I can put it wherever I need to, and I'll also be able to run the alternator wiring in with this little batch here. So that works pretty slick. I do have to rerun the crank and starter wiring. So what I'm going to do is split this off of the coolant temp, because this is all in the same bundle. I'm going to separate these and extend the coolant temp wiring so it comes out over to here, and then I'll run these other sensors back, plug them in, and then what I'll do is probably cut them and then resolder them so they're the right length. So they'll be plugged in down here and then come up right into this bank. Instead of coming around the front and going back, they'll just come right behind the block and be the right length. I may cut and solder, or I might just fold them up like this. But the really cool part about this, everything's already plugged in, or halfway plugged in. I just got them in the right spot. So map sensor, cam sensor, oil, everything is plugged in. So that's pretty much how it would sit. Just got to put the loom on it. This one just comes back to the O2. So don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. But the cool thing is, if you look at where this is coming through, I'll be able to feed it through where the factory wiring originally was. And then look at where all the other wiring is. So this is where the power is. This is where the starter wire is going to connect. So this starter wire, this purple wire, is going to go right where that red wire is connected. So all I got to do is, I could probably just put a spade terminal on this thing, or put a female on this and plug it right into there and be done with it. And then I'll add a relay, little fuse box, right into this other fuse box section here. And a couple more powers. This is the fuel pump signal wire right here. So this is basically going to connect to that blue and white wire that has a little split in it. But it's starting to work out pretty slick right here. So I can probably just separate the rest of these powers and this external source wiring from the actual computer plugs, and then I'll run those down through this hole and probably just put it underneath the dash where the factory PCM was. And then we'll have the little bundle that stays up by the fuse box, and the rest goes back to the computer, and should work pretty good. Okay, so I want to show you guys a little bit better why I separated these three injectors from the rest of them. So if I take these are originally the 3, 5, and 7. So now I'm going to flip these around. Instead of being 3, 5, 7, it'll be 3, 5, 7. So I should be able to leave the 5 where it is and flip the other 2, but that's why I said I'm going to force myself to look at the diagram and make sure that the wiring is actually right when I put it back in the computer. So now I'm going to put these in there this way. And then this will get tucked, and then I'll put this back in the harness and go back to the computer and the power source. And then the other part of it, I still have the number 1 hooked up where it normally was. So then I put the idle air control plug in and the throttle position plug. This thing will flop back like it normally was on the engine, and injector 1 still plugs into the same spot. So that's why I didn't separate the number 1 injector. Oh, I'm all tangled up now. So then I can just take this thing and probably just go right back down underneath and then wire it all in up here, loom this stuff, and be good. So that's why I did it that way, if that makes sense. Only piece of the puzzle remaining besides the coolant temp sensor and extension, I gotta extend the coolant temp sensor. So the only piece besides that is I gotta take this coil pack plug and bring this down over to here. So this has 1 ground wire in it right here, which comes down to this little ground bundle. So I should be able to flip that completely, and I should be able to keep this thing in the harness. I shouldn't have to unplug it from the plugs, but I'll take it out of the big section and then stretch it over, if that makes sense. So instead of this piece being looped around, I'll be able to pull it over, flop that ground over, and then plug it in there. Okay, so I did what I said I was going to do with bringing this coil pack plug over and extended this thing. I did have to snip the ground off instead of flipping it over, but the issue that I'm having now is these wires are too short. So even if it does reach, but the wiring is basically right here and the plug is down here for the computer, and the computer doesn't fit in here, and I want to run it in here. So what I'm going to have to do is actually extend these wires. If I want to get the PCM in underneath the dash, these wires are going to have to be extended to bring it over there. So I'll bring it back through, tape it back into the harness, and then extend the wires. So unfortunately that didn't work as planned, but it's just 1, 2, like 40 wires through there, so it should be good. Okay, gentlemen, we are about to do the unspeakable. I brought that harness back over here. So it's tucked all the way in, so now I'll be able to bring the computer underneath the dash, and then I do have this whole thing right here. Holy moly, and we're just gonna slice it. We're just gonna slice this little cupcake right off of here. And I'm gonna plug this in pretty much where it needs to go. What I'm probably going to do with it is go underneath the fuel rail. And I'm gonna mock this thing up. I did pre-cut 6 wires. I just pulled some random wires out of the ball of wires that I have. I was sure to grab the thicker wires. A lot of these are from the transmission. There's all different gauges of wires in there, real thin, real thick. So I made sure that I grabbed some wiring that was either the same size or thicker, so I can splice this back into this section up here. So this should be good enough length to wrap all the way around and back up here. So what I'm going to do is solder, heat shrink, reconnect these. I got to hook up a ground also, and we'll be done with that. See, I mean, it's looking like just a big old bunch of wires. 2,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Keep pushing it into that ball. There you go. Perfect. Perfect. All right. Now release it. Pull the iron away. Awesome. Awesome. High five, man. Okay, so I have all these hooked up, soldered. I got all the heat shrink prepared on all the wires. But what I wanted to show you at this point is why it's important to kind of take a second look at things when you're looking at wire colors. So look at right here. This wire is pink, but it actually turns into orange because it was underneath the tape and underneath the loom. So it was actually completely orange where I connected it onto this other wire over here. So if you're looking at this section and you're looking over here for an orange wire, there's no orange wire there. But there's a pink wire. But that orange wire over time faded or the pink wire faded into an orange color. And the same thing with this green wire. You can see the color difference right there. It looks green, but this is actually the blue wire. So the blue wire that goes into the harness turns green and it fades into this weird funky green color. So you might actually get distracted by that. So look at this green compared to this green. So this is a faded color. This is a blue wire that turned into a faded green color that looks the exact same color as this actual green wire. So that's just something to consider when you're looking at wiring. Okay, so it's a little bit later. I tried to come out yesterday and get some more work done, but mosquitoes were terrible yesterday, so I went in. Here we go. So I think this is pretty much done as far as I'm going to get it before I put the loom on. So everything is in position. I do have everything taped, and I'm going to run it through here just like that. So that'll have loom. It'll run behind the battery and over underneath here with the wideband wiring. So this will be in position, and there is some little tabs here that I could actually use a little wire tie or whatever and tie it down and hold it into position here. I do have the ECU down underneath now. So this is all good. Fuel pump wire is coming out. I still have to wire all this stuff in. I am going to do this in a separate video because I feel like it might be an entire topic in itself and maybe more of a how-to style video. For that, I do have this fuse box and relay setup that I'm going to use, so I can show you this a little bit better. My plan here is to kind of notch out this cover, like cut a little hole in this cover, and I want to use this and be able to slide this thing in here. So this will just hang on there almost like it's supposed to be there, so I can slide these little relay plugs. I kind of flipped it around because this notch here isn't really big enough to fit the relay notch in there. So I don't know if I want to do it this way or if I want to figure it out and put it on there this way, but I'll do something like this. I have this thing sitting here, so that'll be the fuel pump and main relay, and then I'll have a 12-volt constant fuse, and then the rest will be switched power sources. So I'll show you how to do that in a different video, or how I'm going to do that. This is basically the plan for now. Just for an idea of what it looks like at this point underneath. Just have the computer underneath the floor mat, and then the wiring is just up here. I did fold some of the wiring, taped it into a little bundle, but then it's just right underneath the dash, right against the firewall.